Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming to the last half of the Council for Minnesota Archaeology presentations. Today, I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different than what you've been accustomed to thus far in terms of lots and lots of cool artifacts and interesting projects. I'm going to talk to you about using a form of technology that's been around for about a decade in the specific company called Matterport. And it's one way to document spaces, and then it could be potentially used to document archaeological spaces, and I'll walk through a few examples. I'm going to be doing some jumping back and forth on my screen. Hopefully that doesn't get too confusing, and hopefully it all works. So here we go. All right, so I'm just going to talk briefly today about what this technology is and how it got going, and then more importantly, how I started using it. Then I'm going to show you a series of different models that I've made over the last 5 years. And then I'm going to wrap up by talking about some of the great places I think this is an advantage over other forms of technology, but then still, unfortunately, there are some cons, and we'll talk about those as well. So I've been doing archaeology now for 30 years, and some of my earliest memories back in the labs at MVAC was being told to go get black and white and slide film for the cameras, because we had to do black and white and slide photography for all units and every place we were going. And archaeologists have always been obsessed with using the best form of technology to document the work that they're doing, not only the units that they make, but themselves and the space around them, the work that they're doing. We're usually really good at documenting what's going on in an archaeological site, because we know that once we do our work, our process is a destructive one. And we can never put an archaeological site back together again in the same way that it is now. So we do a lot of documentation. And you know, we start out with black and white and line drawings and things like that, black and white photography, and then color slide. And then we advance, of course, to my favorite, the digital camera, which allows us to take lots and lots and lots and lots of pictures and not have to worry about getting them developed or screwing them up. You can see them right away on the screen. Fantastic. We use, of course, we document with lots and lots of digital. We overshoot digital photography to the point where now our curation facilities don't want us to be incorporating and including all that digital data. So we just love to do it. Well, about 5 years ago, I started using a new form of documentation, and I'm going to talk about that. And that's what I have there on the right side of your screen. I have my iPad, and I have my down in the archaeological unit, I've got my Matterport 1 camera. All right, so Matterport itself started almost 10 years ago, and they essentially use a form of panoramic photography that I think most of us are familiar with. The idea that you can, if you want to catch a big, long scene or within an entire space, you just take a whole bunch of pictures of that space, and then you knit them together and you can see them all in one image. We do this on our phones now to make a long landscape shot or something like that. We just take a long series of shots and they all get stitched together. This technology does that, where it incorporates this panoramic 360 panoramic shots, as many shots as it can. And then it also incorporates infrared light to figure out where it is within a space. It doesn't use GPS or anything like that. It just uses infrared and the normal light for taking pictures. The camera that you can see that I'm standing next to, and this is a nice COVID shot because we got the mask on, the camera is essentially a black box, and it's a black box in more ways than one, and we'll talk about that. It has a series of 8 lenses on it, 12 lenses on it that are looking straight ahead, slightly down and slightly up, and then it rotates around, and I don't have a video showing it rotating around, but it rotates around the base and it collects data all the way around, and then it also uses that infrared light to figure out where it is, so that when you move it anywhere between 8 to 10 feet away to make the next shot, it will overlap those images and that 3D imagery automatically. This technology was originally part of and still mostly used by the real estate industry. They're the huge users of this technology. in the last 5 years, especially, if you go to any open houses or you go online to search for a property to buy, and it's a big market these days as the number of houses has gone down and the increase during COVID for people having good housing spaces has gone up, you can go and see dozens and dozens and hundreds and thousands of Matterport web-based images where you can just walk into and take a virtual tour of a space. So that's what it's designed for. Once you collect all of your data, you then give it to Matterport. They create the 3D model for you. They give it back and give it to you as a web link, which we'll talk about as one of the cons. And then you can post that link anywhere you want. You can put it on Facebook, any kind of social media, emails, websites, things like that. And people can go in and essentially tour through a space. And then you can, if you want, add lots and lots of stuff to it, like videos, additional images, music, all kinds of good text, labels, things like that. So I started using this technology 5 years ago, where just before that, when I'd started my company, I had realized that I wanted to do other things besides archaeology full time. And I started working with an architect, and he and I were going out and using a laser scanner to do some documentation, which is a similar process. We were using a Faro laser scanner from Germany that also rotates around and collects laser information that gets bounced back off the surfaces to it to create a 3D image. It's a $25,000 piece of equipment, and I was helping him document spaces for getting rehabbed and reused. And some of the spaces that we were documenting were historic in nature. Some of them ultimately were places that were torn down or demolished. And I started to see the interest and value in doing this for archaeological processes and projects. We did a project actually down in Nienow, documenting the windmill that's down there. And we used this Faro scanner to document the whole interior and exterior of the structure. And then we worked with a company out of Florida to make a fly-through video using our technology that basically you hit play, it flew through a series of spaces that you had created with your laser technology, and then it was done. It was a great product. The client really liked it. The problem was it was very expensive to produce. And the guy I was working with, the architect I was working with, Drew Bjorklund, said, go find us a cheaper form of technology that does something similar. So I started looking around, and the only game at that time was Matterport. And luckily, they have continued to dominate in this field, else I would have bought some obsolete equipment. So I started using this for properties, and then I started using it on archaeological sites afterwards. All right, so I'm going to show you some models and some examples now. So I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to go, this is my Matterport account. And one of the great things, and that we'll talk about, is that you could have a large account with lots of information on it. Not only do you sort of archive all of your spaces, but then you can also track how many people view each individual space when.
Sorry, Jeremy, I'll interrupt you. I think you have to change which screen you're sharing.
Oh, darn. Okay, all right. I thought that might happen. Okay. Thank you, Laura, for telling me that. All right, can you see the web screen now?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay, good. All right, so this is my account. I'm going to click into, hopefully, the space. There we go. Can you see, does it continue to show these things, Laura?
Yeah, it's as long as you're on the web page, you're good.
Okay, all right. Well, it's going to open another window, so we'll see if I have to do this again. All right, so I'm going to go down to this is the different varieties of scans that I've got. I'm going to go to the Historical Society, and one of the things I started doing early on was modeling museums and museum spaces. So hopefully we'll see if this works. Laura, jump in if it doesn't work and I have to share another screen, but I think it's going to work. All right, Laura, can we still see that?
Yeah, you're good.
Good. All right, so this is the model itself. You can see on the ground here, these little ovals, that's every spot where I took an image from. And you basically can go through and tour an entire space. You can see their archaeological exhibit they have. You can zoom in to get a better, closer shot at things. You can see that they're using a story in stone, nice poster there from Minnesota, from the Office of State Archaeologist. And you can zoom through entire space to just run around if you want and see everything that this is. I mean, this place is way out, and one of the advantages that I saw was that this is way out in Traverse County. This is really far away from us. This is the extreme western Minnesota. No one's going to be driving 3 hours to go see this historical society unless they really wanted to, but you can just click on this link and you can see everything that's in their space at a click of a button, and we can go out and see the overall space, how it's oriented. You can see that it's in an old railway depot, and then you can click down into any space within it and jump into a different location and see all of the really cool stuff. So that's how I first started using it. Then I realized that there were some other forms that you could do with the technology, and I started going to some more traditional historic spaces like the Leduc Mansion and the Sibley House. And then Pat Emerson allowed me to go and do this work at the Round Tower. And she really had the hope that the entire space out there could eventually be done. And I think it really could be with the technology as it is evolving now. This was, interestingly enough, this idea for making a virtual model of Fort Snelling was one of the very first legacy grants that was ever funded, and with a university on the East Coast. And unfortunately, the technology at the time, it didn't quite work very well, and so they abandoned the project. But you can go inside spaces, you can look anywhere that you set up that camera. It works really well. There are some limitations that we'll talk about. You can see there is some brightness issues. It's mostly because I'm using a cheap, the early camera, the $5,000 cheap camera is the camera that I'm using. So I documented spaces for a while, and then I actually started using it to document archaeological sites. That was my next sort of step in the process. So I'm going to show you some examples of some archaeology scans. And what I really like about using the archaeology scans, and let's see if I can find a really nice one here. I mean, there's lots and lots of them. But this is one from a privy unit at Upper Post, Fort Snelling, historic Fort Snelling. So you can jump down right into the unit. You can see these wonderful people out here that are standing around the excavators of said unit, and you can also see the idiot that's doing the model itself. But you can get down into the unit. You can see exactly where the privy wall is at. You can see all the feature cuts and outlines. You can move around in the space. And so essentially, before, where you'd have to take hundreds and hundreds of pictures to capture every single thing within this unit, you still would not get the overall picture of having stood there. And now you can. You can stand right in the spot, see the outline, the trench that was built, dug on the outside before they laid in the privy outside walls. You can see where artifacts were at. You can view it as a dollhouse so that you can rotate the space around and get a better idea of it. You can zoom in on the locations and you look at the walls. You can get an overhead shot to see how things lay out. So it's replacing profile and plan view shots as well. And you can also measure within it. It's a crude, it's not a very accurate measuring system because you would have to zoom in much closer, but it's still within an inch or so, I would say, when you're dealing with a 6-foot space, that's pretty good. So those are some just quick examples of units. I'm gonna go back and share my PowerPoint again. All right, so I'm going to talk now about some pros and cons of this technology. First of all, since it's a digital technology, you can essentially store it forever, and you don't have to really worry about the space. The product itself is actually produced by Matterport. They just send you back the link, and as long as you have storage within your unit of the subscription that you've got, you can store things for a really long time. You can share it anywhere to anyone over the internet, wherever you send it to them in an email or whatnot, so they can see exactly what you're seeing. You can talk about it over Zoom. I've led virtual tours of spaces where I open it up on Zoom. I've got 20 people. We do a house tour. You can stop and talk about every individual object in that space if you want. You can also create labels and things within it so that people can do their own self-guided tours, which is what a lot of historical societies are doing now. You can download the XYZ 3D data so that you could put this into, if you're familiar with making a BIM model or a BIM map, if you're an engineer, so that you can actually do some other kinds of interesting technology with it. And it does allow you to do a few things like plan and profile and measure different distances. You can also, when we were back in that model, I could take a picture from any angle. Anything I could see on the screen, I could take a picture of. So you could take hundreds of more pictures. Or maybe you're like, when you're about out there, I forgot to take a picture of this particular aspect or of the unit, so I'm going to take a picture of that now. We didn't use it when we were in there, but you can click on in the very right-hand corner of the model, and you can enable it to be VR, so that you could be actually walking in your goggles, and you could see the space as if you truly were there. So those are a huge sets of sort of bringing it to the next level for documentation for using Matterport. There are some cons though. One of the biggest cons is cost. Once you have all the technology, it's not very expensive at all, but it's getting the technology itself. If you want to use the cheapest camera right now, they've actually gone down in price. They're only $4,000 to buy the cheapest camera. You then have to have an iPad to run the camera. So iPads are not inexpensive. And then once you have those pieces of technology, of course, you need the tripod that it goes on. You have to have an account with Matterport, which costs you anywhere between $50 to $300 a month to have your account. And you can fill up your space. I can have 100 models active at any one time in my space. I'm already bumping into that with my clients, so then I have to get more space, and that costs more money. One of the biggest problems for us as archaeologists with this is that you really can't use it much outdoors. The infrared light that they use to figure out where it is in its locational space is impacted by light, sunlight. So you can't just set it up outdoors and run the camera and get all of your locational spots to align. They will not align. You cannot make models. But what you can do is you can cheat. Over the last 5 years, I've figured out how to do that. And the best way to do it, as you'll see in some of my other models, and I linked a few of them here on this PowerPoint, is you can do it right at sunrise and right at sunset. Where the sun is lowest. You still have plenty of light for shooting. There isn't direct light coming from the sun, and you can be in shade. You can have an overhead like I had at a lot of those units. Anything that blocks and scatters that UV light coming from the sun, that way the infrared light can work properly with the scanner. It does have a blur spot. Yes, sir? I got 2 minutes.
You're getting close. You're doing a good job of filling up your time.
I'm trying as best I can, but
good job.
There's some blur spot at the bottom and at the top. You could see those. And another big problem, I think, for me and for others is that, one, the product is owned by you and Matterport. They actually use the information that you're giving them to develop an AI, which is helping them better create the spaces, but then they get to own a little bit of that slice of it as well. Usually clients that are using it, they don't really care about that because it's a short-term product. And also the data goes in, they give you the model. I don't know how they do it. They won't tell me, it's proprietary, so it's a black box. It's a true black box process, but it's really interesting. That's the end of my presentation. I'm very happy that I was able to do 20 minutes of it. If you have questions and things, please let me know, or you can email me about other costs and stuff that I use it for. But I use it on lots of archaeological sites now, and I enjoy using it.
So we do have